our organization, we work with a lot of institutions, so places like schools and orphanages, hospitals, and in the beginning of our partnership, we provide 10 years of spare parts, peripherals, maintenance, service guarantee, and water quality tests every year for that 10 years. And that's been a design for the past few years internally at our organization, but we really have not been able to conceptualize how to take it past year 10. Right? I mean, I think that's still a long way out as an average in the sector. But to us, we really want to try and figure out how we take these projects on in perpetuity. Maybe not by us directly, but how those communities can actually support that financially to take those projects on. Yeah. So we approached IRC earlier this year to try and get a better understanding, because our projections, they take us right to the end of year 10. Yeah. And then they just kind of stop, and that's not going to be sufficient. So we inquired with IRC how in fact we could better project what years 11 through 20 would look like, and even thereafter. We're still in the ideation phase and trying to figure out what that looks like, but we've been adamantly pursuing how do we keep these projects going indefinitely rather than just a 10-year hard stop. I mean, the one piece that we were not approaching with a ton of rigor was just the CapManEx costs. Yeah. We were actually surprised that when one of your colleagues, Katerina, came to our office and we talked about LCC the entire day, we actually found that we were much further ahead than we had thought, which was great. Yeah. But the CapManEx was where we were really lacking, and where most organizations do lack. Only in the last 4 or 5 months since she was at our office, that's what we focused on specifically, really going back with our staff and finding out which pieces have failed in the past, which pieces did we not predict would underperform, and which pieces have we not appropriately kind of calculated for. And so those are the CapManEx costs. Almost 100% of the time, those are CapManEx. Well, figuring out how to raise the money for that, I mean, that's going to be a challenge, because it increased our costs by, maybe say 5%. Yeah. But no, I mean, theoretically, philosophically, personally, professionally, everyone in the organization knows that we want to be able to incorporate those. So no, there's been no pushback whatsoever. Examples on how LCC has affected our organization, there's two that come to mind. In Cambodia right now, we're trying to initiate a tariff structure to pay for years 11 through 20. So that between year 1 and 10, our partner sites are actively funding years 11 through 20 of system and maintenance costs. And so when we've been devising this, we're calling it the Sustainability Savings Fund. And so every 3 months, partners pay X amount towards this fund in an interest-bearing account, and that again pays for years 11 through 20. But in doing the cost modeling, we've absolutely had to use LCC to predict what that would look like, taking into account all these different variances. And it's been huge for us in our learning, right? Originally, we were covering just hard costs, hard equipment costs. And once we started factoring in LCC, our costs increased by about 25%. Which is great to know now, because otherwise we'd be fundraising in 10 years from now to fund that balance. So we've been actually strategically using LCC for our future projections. And then in terms of staff uptake, the philosophy around LCC, how have people gravitated towards it, or have they not? And I'd say internally, some of the vocabulary was tough. CapEx, CapManEx, OpEx, all this stuff. And so when we tried to describe what CapManEx was to a lot of our staff, especially the international staff, instead of CapManEx, we started calling it OSM, which stands for Oh Shit Moment, and everybody got it. What are those moments that when it happens, you just say, oh shit? And how do you predict for those? And it really is, I think, a much easier and visceral way into CapManEx. But that's worked hugely for our organization. Some of our Cambodian and Chinese and Nepalese staff didn't quite get the CapManEx. They all get OSM. China is our biggest project to date, and it's actually unlike most of our other projects. Most of our other projects are real small geography, and we're trying to do 100% coverage. In China, we actually work in all 31 provinces and municipalities, and by February of 2013, we'll be in 670 orphanages, which represents all of them. So by Q1 of next year, we're able to say every orphanage in China has clean water. Right now, we only provided 5 years of support originally for those sites, which was very nearsighted. We weren't projecting 10 years at that time. And so we're actively pursuing separate funding for an additional 10 years to take us to 2023, but with a very real belief that the Chinese government, and the very real pursuit that the Chinese government will take over the projects indefinitely from 2023 on. And all of that is based on LCC projections. So internally, we're using that for the new funder for the next decade of work, and then to the Chinese government for 2023 and beyond. So we first heard of life cycle costing from Water for People. Ned was a huge proponent of discussing what it looked like to take these sites or to take projects on indefinitely, and so it was a huge catalyst for us to be able to internally start analyzing where we were at financially, what our predictors were, and how far off were we. And so Water for People was huge for us to start getting closer to thinking about LCC.